Hey friends, welcome back to Heretical Hippies, where Anna and Carrie Jo wander back into the wreckage of their deconstruction to see if they can offer hope to anyone else who might be climbing out of the dust and ashes of their faith. Buckle up, it's about to get real. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Heretical Hippies. Hey, Anna.
Hi, gang. How's it going?
Today, we are jumping right into thought-terminating phrases. And that may be a strange concept to you. You've never heard that before. So I'm just going to give like a little background on what this is. And then Anna and I are going to share some of our air quote favorites that we hear within the Christian community. So, the term thought-terminating cliche or phrase, it was popularized by Robert J. Lifton. He wrote a book called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. Lifton said, the language of the totalist environment is characterized by the thought-terminating cliche. The most far-reaching and complex of human problems are compressed into brief, highly reductive, definitive-sounding phrases, easily memorized and easily expressed. These become the start and finish of any ideological analysis. So we're going to go over our list of the thought-terminating phrases. We have not shared them with each other, so we don't know how much we have in common, but I would surmise that we have probably several that overlap. What do you think?
Definitely. I'm sure.
Why don't you start us off, Anna?
Yeah. The first one I had was God works in mysterious ways.
Ooh, okay. Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that specifically, but what I did have was God's ways are higher than our ways. And that's like along the same line of thought.
Yeah, definitely. I had that and that together as well.
Okay.
So I think that idea is saying, basically you can't know where to go from here or how to explain this. This is all information that only is for God. And so for me, it's frustrating because I feel like on one hand, God seems to make himself really clear to some people, throughout scripture. And yet he's choosing not to make it clear. And a lot of people say that, that's what walking by faith looks like, right? So
that's another thought-terminating phrase.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
faith in general is you have to stop thought.
Absolutely.
In order to have faith, right? You have to stop thought. So what we're doing with these, I think one of the things I would like to do is instead of stopping thought, what does it look like to engage with people that do say these type of phrases to us? So for me, one of the things that came up with this particular phrase was just trust is built on dependability. So, when you are in a relationship with someone, the give and take is what allows the relationship to continue to grow and flow. So we have to use our imagination with God and insert our own explanation of why we think he does some things the way he does them, So everything is subjective. And so a lot of what my responses are, my ideas of responses to people with thought-terminating phrases are to get them to think about how limiting that is for them as a person, for me as a person. So as a response to someone saying God's ways are higher than my ways, well, some of the thoughts I had were, why wouldn't he want me to know the answer to this?
Yeah.
I help my kid when they need help in this type of area, why wouldn't God want to help me and, help me as well, right? Like there's also just thinking about he makes clear what he wants to make clear. And so the bottom line is he doesn't want me to know.
Yeah, which absolutely sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes in those situations, like I actually wrote next to the God's ways are higher than our ways, things that happened that where I encountered this phrase. So for instance, like unanswered prayer or disease, like a newly diagnosed disease in someone. And then, of course, that would go along with unanswered prayer, praying for their healing, and it doesn't happen. Calamity. Like, for instance, and I've mentioned this in their podcast, when Hurricane Ian hit here in Florida, I was praying that God would redirect. And if anyone listened to that episode, you'll recall that was kind of my last ditch effort on prayer. And I didn't even say to myself, this is going to be the last time I do that if it doesn't work. But I realize now, looking back, that that was the instance where I was like, yeah, this prayer thing is bullshit. Because so many people lost their homes. So many people died in that hurricane. And it felt really close because it was literally very close to me. And I just remember I was talking to one of my friends. She's a very devout, like, mystic Christian. I really admire her faith, actually. But she was saying things like, well, God sometimes uses suffering. And this is actually one of my phrases that I wrote down, because she's not the only one I've heard this, that God uses suffering to get our attention or to teach us things. And it's like, what the hell, man? Like, really? And so I think when we are encountered with these, God's ways are higher than our ways, God uses suffering, it's really interesting because those phrases are either taking the onus off of God, getting him off scot-free for the situation that you find yourself in, or it puts the onus, or I should say, sometimes it's both, it puts the onus on you. And I have some that I'll share later that actually puts the onus on you as the human as to why you might be experiencing fill in the blank. And it's fascinating to me that when we are met with some of the worst experiences of our lives, that's when these cliches, these phrases find their way to the tips of the tongues of the faithful. And it's honestly infuriating. I've encountered so many of them so frequently. And it literally shuts you down. That's the whole purpose of it. You can't say anything back to that. It's kind of manipulative when you think about it.
So the human brain wants to find an answer to things, right? And it will, a lot of times like the Buddhists call it the monkey brain, because it's kind of just running all over the place and it seems so hard to tame. And our brains just go, 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 go. And I think part of the reason why I'm reading a book called The Biology of Religion, basically, like, of myth, like why our brains tend to develop these stories. And we're naturally wanting to figure out answers, right? Or wanting to come up with answers. And I think that's part of the reason I've walked away from Christianity. And then I think that's also part of the reason why so many people are drawn to a faith, because you can literally, and I know what this feels like, my husband and I have talked about it many times, you can run in circles trying to, if you allow yourself, get so caught up in trying to find all the answers that it can be overwhelming and daunting, really. And in the same way that people in religion, want to save the world,
Right.
It's daunting, right? And so it's something about faith, though, that will allow us to just pause, And so there's a positive side to it in that way. Some people that are allowing their faith to give them a sense of peace, right? And some people would say that I would rather be ignorant and be at peace than be tortured by trying to seek the truth all the time, basically.
Yeah.
And so I find myself in a similar way trying to have a balance. There is a balance, I think. We're not completely negating the importance of some level of faith in our life. And I think that's one of the things these thought terminating phrases do, is they're like, okay, we don't know the answers, so just remember God's ways are bigger than your ways, or God is more mysterious, or whatever it is that people say. But I think the real problem is not just within having faith, it is within the idea that somebody is not wanting to come alongside you most of the time and really be there for you.
Right.
It is a phrase that people use to absolve themselves of any responsibility to actually engage on a deeper level about the subject that you're struggling with or whatever.
Absolutely. Share your next one. It leads right into one perfectly.
Yeah, I'll be praying for you.
Yes. Thoughts and prayers. Another school shooting. Thoughts and prayers.
Right.
What the fuck? I mean, that's great. Thoughts and prayers are wonderful. If that is helpful for you processing things, wonderful. I'm happy for you. But
Right.
really, it does absolutely nothing to help the person / people right in front of you that are suffering or going through something.
Yeah. So meanwhile, what do you suggest I do?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect response.
Like, what should I do? How can you help me instead?
Yeah. Talk about shifting the onus. That's great.
Right.
I mean, that's what they're doing. They're just saying, like, hands up, like, oh, well, I'll pray for you. I'm not going to offer anything practical, but
yeah, it is overwhelming. We can't involve ourselves in everybody's problems. But if I, or I'm sure Carrie Jo, are sharing something deep, it doesn't take much. It genuinely doesn't take much to show somebody that you care, and you don't have to drop everything and fix their problems. And I think that's the pressure that a lot of people put on themselves, is I don't know how to fix everything. And it's so overwhelming. The media is constantly reminding us of ways that we are flawed, and lack. And and our lives are all full, and life is really, really messy. And so when we are listening to one another and you say, I'll pray for you, it's become just like a thing that we do, like saying good morning.
Yeah, it's just an automatic response.
Right. And although I can understand the heart behind it and the pattern within our society that it has become to say it, I also think that we need to pull back on saying it quite as much, like not we, but, just as a culture. That's part of the reason why Brene Brown's work is so important for everybody to know about and to learn about, because she's teaching about how we can be vulnerable.
Yeah,
and
how to sit with one another and hold space for each other's trauma and need to share.
Right.
Yeah, I love that she just emphasizes presence. Like the mere act of being present with somebody and letting them process, maybe asking some good questions, follow-up questions. It's so powerful. I mean, people in general, I feel like the human race, we really want to be heard, seen, and loved. And being loved goes along with being heard and seen. Like they're kind of a package deal.
Right.
And so honestly, more powerful than saying, I'll pray for you, or even offering to pray in that moment. I mean, I've had that happen too, like countless times. And that was great and all for that phase of my life, because I was a firm believer in prayer, and that felt nice to me. But I feel like it would have been more powerful if they would have offered to just sit with me and hear about how I'm feeling, how my circumstances are affecting me, the doubts that I'm having, about my faith. And I feel like maybe the I'll pray for you is a subconscious way for people to avoid all of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people use that specifically. I mean, maybe some do, but I wonder if it's just a tactic that has been adopted by the Christian community in a way to kind of make yourself feel better by saying, I'll pray for you. Because I mean, I'll admit, when I would tell people that, I felt like good about that. I felt positive. I thought, okay, like I would pray. I wouldn't just say I'll pray for you. I genuinely would. I would like go back or sit in my car and pray for them or whatever. But it really kind of is an ego scratcher, I think. And
oh, absolutely.
And yeah, you can avoid the messiness of having to get your hands dirty,
Yeah. And I think you made a really good point. Like just saying, I hear you, looking people in the eyes.
Yes.
And just being present with someone is powerful. Now, a lot of our communication is online or on the phone, and so that's not as possible. But just saying, whenever we go through the checkout, or whenever you're involved in an interaction in public, like looking people in the eyes is a way to show people that they are valuable.
Yes.
Like if someone is like you said, if just saying "I hear you" to a friend or family member that's sharing their thoughts or their life with you, it's like, "I hear you, and I am so sorry that this is happening to you."
Yeah.
And I care. I'm not sure how I can help, but I care. Just simple stuff like that is, I think it makes a different kind of impact than just saying, "I'll pray for you."
Right. I wish our audience was comprised of a lot of Christians. I'm sure some Christians do listen to this, but I just feel like this would be a really good, helpful book or something, pamphlet, tract. I don't know. Hand it out in the church parking lot. Ways
Sure.
to engage with people in an actual Christ-like fashion. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think, okay, so we made our lists. I told you this before we hit record, that I forgot to write responses down. And then, so this morning as I was prepping and looking over my notes, I started to write some things down. And I love that we've come up with responses for people like you and me who are going to be on the receiving end of these thought terminating phrases or cliches. And I know you had like some specific ones for like the bullet point phrases that we hear. I kind of had some general ones that could be applied to many, maybe not all of the ones I came up with, but one that I really liked that I thought, ooh, that's good. Like that it's kind, but it's also like kind of putting them on the spot to think about what they just said. This is what I wrote down. Were you intending that to be helpful? Because of course they are, right? They think they're being
Right.
helpful, but they have not stopped to think about the effect that fill in the blank phrase would have on someone. And then, well, I'll share
Or
some other
even
ones
just
later.
saying that's not helpful.
Right. And that's a little more
Just letting them
pointed. See,
know.
I'm Midwest nice. So if I'm going to say something that's confrontational, it's going to be a little softer. Like, were you intending that to be helpful? Not, that's not helpful, motherfucker. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing with you. I know you didn't mean it like that. But yeah, no, you could, depending on the relationship you have with them, you could say, that's really not helpful right now.
It's not helpful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that tone and obviously the dynamic in the relationship is going to affect like how that's received or whatever. But simply just saying that, I think is can really shift the environment. Can you give me some better ideas?
Yeah, and that's a great follow-up to that's not helpful, or I don't find that to be helpful for me right now. Do you have anything else for me?
Right. You have another option?
Yeah. I choose door 3, not that one. Oh man.
What's your next one?
Okay, so oh gosh, I mean I have so many good ones. Let me see what I want to say next. Okay, this one, some of these going to go hand in hand. Like the next one on my list was, we live in a fallen world and these things happen because sin rules the human heart. Like, and that's in response to like, let's say when somebody undergoes some terrible thing. I don't want to say it. Like you're the recipient of something terrible from the opposite gender as a woman. But, if something like that happens and, like the community is grieving and kind of asking questions like, why, what? This person was so amazing. Like, how could this happen to them? That's one of the cliches. Well, we live in a fallen world, and until hearts are changed, something along those lines. They just put all of the wickedness, I guess, if you will, they again get God off scot-free. Like he gets off, like there's, he's not held accountable for anything for allowing these things to happen, because I mean the evangelical faith, you believe that God is all powerful, right? So he
Right.
allows and he disallows and everything else. So to
Mhm.
explain those things, or like a child getting cancer, God forbid, like all these terrible things. Well, we live in a fallen
Mhm.
world. These things are going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And it just stops. It literally stops you in your tracks. What are you supposed to say to that?
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah,
within
it's,
the system. If you are in the system, you do not have the latitude to be
mhm.
asking deeper questions or to be
Mhm.
expressing doubt. I mean, you might
Mhm.
internally be asking questions and thinking, what the hell, God? Like, really?
Mhm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
have countless examples of those in my Christian experience. And
Sure.
yeah, I've said all this shit to people. That's
Mhm.
what's so humbling about them. It's like you and I
Yeah.
know them so well, not because we've received them, but because we've
Mhm.
spoken them.
Sure. One of the things that helped me develop a vernacular for responding to people in their challenges is having gone through my own, obviously, but also asking my friends that have genuinely been through really difficult situations, the loss of a child,
Mm.
um, cancer diagnosis, just really bad stuff that all of us fear. I've asked them what type of responses make you feel heard, give you a sense of belonging,
Mm.
or help you feel less alone,
Yeah.
things like that. And the responses that I've gotten back from them have been a lot of nothing like what we're talking about. No thought terminating phrases,
Of course not.
you know?
Because it's
Um,
all bullshit.
right. It has been more so things like, I hear you. I'm holding space for you. Right now, I'm calling just to listen. I don't have any answers. I don't know how to respond. I just want to be there for you, or putting your words or putting your heart into action, which is like taking them a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their house burned down. You can't rebuild their home for them. You can't pay for a new car or whatever it is they need, but you can take them a gift card to Starbucks or invite them out to coffee or, like
Right.
showing that person that you care, even if it's just dropping off a gift on their front porch or sending them a gift on their phone, a
Yeah.
funny gift. Like I have a couple of times, I think I have actually done this with you. I've had a few friends that I've talked to that have been going through a really hard time, and one of the things that I like to do is send my favorite funny videos.
Uh-huh.
There's
I
a
know.
couple in particular that I always send people. And it's kind of like my way of being like, okay, at least I know I could probably get them to laugh today,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just I think one of the things that can be helpful is asking those friends, what is it that you need right now? Instead of giving the thought terminating phrase. This is an option for people that are tempted to say things like lean not on your own understanding,
Right.
you know, but in all your ways, acknowledge him.
And he will direct your
Right.
paths.
Right. Right. Instead of using scripture to stop people from processing their trauma, you know,
Yeah.
why don't we come up with ways to engage?
Yes. And side note, as we're kind of talking about this, that is one reason why so many devout evangelical Christians are kind of stunted emotionally in their emotional intelligence and ability to process trauma. It's because they're part of a system that doesn't allow for it. And
Right.
I only know that now being out of it and looking back at the ways I dealt with things. And it's like, I mean, I guess that served me in that moment in time because that was the only resource I had available to myself.
Hmm.
Like the systematic gaslighting and thought terminating phrases and stuff that I would kind of apply to my wounds. But being out of that system, I have had a really hard time figuring out ways to cope with current or past trauma. And what
Hmm.
is the healthiest way to actually process this and feel these things?
Yeah.
And Yes. So just being super vulnerable, which that's kind of my default. I've shared many different times on social media about my struggles with depression and anxiety, and they are very recent. And, people within the church who have watched my journey would say, well, yes, obviously. I mean, she's left the church. She's left Jesus behind. She needs Jesus in her life, and that will take care of all of it. Well, no, actually, it's because of the system that I was in that stunted my ability to actually process and cope.
Mm-hmm.
That has kind of created this perfect storm of depression and anxiety because of my lack of coping skills.
Yeah.
And this is just my little personal PSA. Anna and I didn't talk about this beforehand, but if you have stepped out of high control religion like Anna and I have, and you are experiencing depression and anxiety, you are not failing. It is not
Mm-hmm.
because you have done something wrong by walking away. This is a natural byproduct of the system failing you. So
Mm-hmm.
please, please reach out to one of us. We are happy to
Sure.
listen. We're happy to be
Sure.
present for you.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy to even point you in a direction of possible resources that might be available in your area or whatever. I would be happy to do some legwork for you. Like, I will Google your
Mm-hmm.
area and find a really well-known therapist
Right.
that can help you through religious trauma. Yeah, because it's no small thing. It
Mm-hmm.
ruins, like, these thought terminating phrases. The system that it's built out of is very damaging to the human psyche. And
Yeah.
I'm living proof of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll step off my soapbox now.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's really important, the process of um learning how to relearning how to engage with unlearning and relearning how to engage with the world around you and to how to process your life and the things that have happened to you. And yeah, man, it's constant. It's a constant journey. And I don't think any of us should let our guard down and give up for long and not and try to figure out better ways of being a human.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges with the thought terminating phrases. The thought terminating phrase is just a symptom of a bigger problem within the church.
Yes.
And that, yes, there's a lot of really beautiful churches that are encouraging growth and changing with the times and developing ways of connecting as a people group better and better. There are churches doing that. And for them, I applaud them for sure. The church that you and I grew up in wasn't doing that.
Correct.
And so that's where we're coming from. I know there are some people might be listening to this that may not be able to relate,
I hope
but
so. I hope there are
I
many
hope
people that
so.
cannot relate to our experiences. I really do.
Exactly. Yeah. But we're sharing for those who can. So
That's right.
that the last one that I had on my list is the Lord gives and takes away. The Lord gives and the Lord takes
Ooh,
away.
another scripture weaponized.
Yeah.
Job, right? It's in Job.
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
so.
And I think that's a hard one to respond to because it's like, I mean, a lot of these are just definite, all of these really are just like, this is it. It's
Right.
like, there's no conversation to be had after this. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. And so a response that I might give to something like that is, really?
Yes. Yes.
I want to hear more about, I think that why would you think that God would want to take away in this situation?
I think that's
Really?
great because they're
Why?
not thinking about the impact of what they're
Mhm.
saying.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
And to
like,
ask them a
what
question that gets
uh,
those kind of gears turning, I think
yeah.
that can be so powerful.
A lot of my responses are questions. Meanwhile, what do you suggest I do?
Right.
Or, um, what does that look like?
Ooh, that's a good
Or,
one.
well, then what do I lean on if I don't lean on my own understanding? You know?
Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect.
Rhetorical questions are my go-to, really, because what I'm trying to do is develop conversation. I don't want to respond to their thought terminating phrase with another thought terminating phrase.
Correct.
I want to engage and draw them in so that they're thinking, and I want them to come to some of the conclusions that I've come to, or maybe some of the conclusions they need to come to, that are processed in their own brains. I don't want to tell them how to think. I want to.
They have enough people doing that in their lives.
Right. I want to encourage thought is basically the goal.
Yeah, that is a great solution. Actually, I love that. That's way better than some of the things I came up with. So you want to hear another one of my responses?
Sure, please.
Okay, so this was another one. This is like a little bit more pointed for me. So I would say that's extremely dismissive of my current reality, or that's extremely dismissive of my current suffering. Whatever, whatever you feel like would fit the scenario best. Because you're just stating a fact that whatever phrase they just used on you, like, you are basically dismissing all of my human experience. What am I supposed to do with that,
Yeah.
And that could be used in response to probably any of the phrases we're sharing today. Yeah.
Even stating something that comes to mind with that is stating, like, I still feel lost,
Oh,
or
yes.
I'm still really sad,
Right.
or I'm still having a really hard time.
Yeah.
In spite of that statement, like, it's still really difficult.
Yes.
It doesn't alleviate any pain for me.
Have you actually used these like in real time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I haven't done it often. I'll say that. But I've definitely in the last couple of years have, when I listen to people that I can see it, how when you're listening and you can see it brewing in their brain.
Yep.
And it's coming,
Yep.
I immediately am, and this is probably presumptive, but it's because I've been trained, right? I immediately am starting to think, how do I really want to respond to this? And yes, I have come back. I have responded with some of these type of phrases or statements or questions before. And unfortunately, I haven't really seen the fruit of that in real time. Usually it's received, they don't know what to do with themselves or don't know what to say.
But that's good. Like, I feel like you're muddying the waters in a good way.
Sure. Yeah. And so maybe that is a seed that will develop more later on. Who knows? The goal being to engage in meaningful ways and not dismiss people. I'm not trying to just make people more like me. I believe that the way that I've grown since coming out of the church is healthier. And so I'm hoping that I am challenging people to think outside of their box and maybe quite possibly develop some thought patterns that are a little bit healthier.
Yes. Yeah. And to be clear, I mean, you and I are speaking from our perspective, our experiences, our lives. We're not like hoping that everybody leaves the church. I hope that's really clear in all of our episodes, that is not like our end goal. We just want to equip people who have left the church, or maybe people who know and love some people who have left the church, like equip them with information that is useful. And this is useful information, not just for those who have left, but also people who are still in the church. Like, you can still remain in the church, but also develop a healthier sense of processing the grief and the suffering, how to support others while they're going through stuff. I mean, it's really remarkable when you think about the fact that the church, meaning like the people within the church, will say like they're there to serve the world, right, in Christ-likeness. And so many of their mechanisms and the programming is anything but helpful. If anything else, it's harmful to the way that it treats people who are enduring something. And I know that's not intentional. I think they have great intentions. I think most people mean zero harm by these phrases. They just don't understand that it's hurtful and harmful. So yeah, hopefully some of these things we share resonates with you as the listener, and you can try it out on people or change the way that you engage with people as a Christ follower. Did you have another one on your list, Anna? I have a few more.
That's it for me.
Okay. So I I've heard this countless times, and I've probably said it too. No, I know I have said it. It is, I don't want to worship a God that I can wrap my mind around. And this is still kind of in relationship to, things that are mysterious, or also the phrase God's ways are higher than our ways would be applied to. Um, but I think it's a little bit different in the way that we engage with it personally. Like if we just state God's ways are higher than our ways, okay, like you're presumably stating a fact, air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say, I don't want to worship a God that I can wrap my mind around, that's
Mm-hmm.
almost like passive aggressive shaming the other person for wanting to
Mm.
wrap their mind around the weird
Mm-hmm.
circumstance they find themselves in and what is God's role
Like,
in this.
right. Like their idea of who God is bigger than your idea of who God is.
Yes, but
Mm-hmm.
also like kind of shaming you for even thinking you could wrap your head around him,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that's like, I remember being on the receiving end of that phrase, and it just always kind
Mm-hmm.
of rattled me and almost like humbled me, I guess, in a Christian way, thinking, oh, like maybe I'm too proud. I was thinking I could wrap my head around it, or I was thinking I
Mm-hmm.
should be able to. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just really dismissive. And yeah, honestly, it's quite rude when you think about it.
I know. I'm trying to debate whether or not I would want to engage with somebody who says that. Like at that point, like I might just walk away. you
Yeah. Oh, I
know,
have a response. I have another response. You want to hear it? This
please.
one's a little more wordy, so if you're taking notes, you might want to go back, rewind, and play it again, because this one is like you'd have to kind of like rehearse it in front of a mirror to have it ready, like
Mhm.
in the moment. Okay, so you could say, I understand that response is part of your programming, but have you considered how harmful/hurtful those words are to someone in my situation? That
Mm.
like is more pointed, like more on the nose, and it really does
Mhm.
hold the person accountable for what they've just said
Right.
without
Right.
thinking.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if that's too much to say, because a lot of times in the moment it's
Yeah,
hard
that's a
to
lot to spit out.
even just saying that's hurtful,
Mhm.
or just saying that's hurtful. Honestly, keeping it simple. Because if this is somebody you want to try to engage with, like for me, I just said I wanted to walk away. But if this is somebody you actually want to have a conversation with, it doesn't take much. And I think that's one of the things that I had to learn over time. I always kind of felt like I had to have a perfect response
Mhm.
in order to have a meaningful conversation. But really, what I need is just engagement. So, how can I continue to engage that shows interest, but also makes a point,
Mhm.
you know? And saying that's hurtful is going to communicate to that person that maybe what they thought they were doing is not what they're actually doing.
Right.
If they're the kind of person that cares, that might be enough to engage in a deeper conversation about it. And then you can go further and tell them why you think it's hurtful
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
they want to talk about it, if it's clear they want to engage about it.
That's actually a good way to test the waters. I like that, because if you
Mhm.
say that's hurtful to somebody who genuinely cares for you and values your relationship, they are going to respond and try to go a little bit deeper and, figure this thing out with you. If they don't
Mhm.
have an established relationship, or the one that they have with you is highly flawed or based on an agenda,
Mhm.
then they might just apologize and walk away. And so
Mhm.
that's actually really helpful for you in that moment, because you don't have to engage with the toxicity any longer. And
Mhm.
now they will think twice before saying some stupid phrase to you again.
Right.
And they might think
I
twice before saying it to someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I hear somebody say stuff like that, my heart starts
Oh,
fluttering.
yeah.
My heartbeat raises and I start feeling like a little, like you were saying earlier, a little bit of that maybe trauma for some people might to come to the surface, maybe just awareness of how ridiculous something is can make you so frustrated that your heart starts pacing or racing. And um, so keeping it simple is for me the way that I combat that. Because if I start to say too much, I'll fumble on my words,
Yeah, it'll be a train wreck. Yeah.
Right. Mm.
Yeah. No, for me, same thing. I have a very visceral reaction, and I've thought a lot about it. And I think it's because my body and mind they know that I'm not safe.
Right.
Like that, the phrase, whatever is used, whatever's being communicated is clearly it's a not safe place for me anymore. And not that it never will be again. It's possible that it's just a one-off thing, but it's interesting how our bodies are like such good communicators, and we don't often give it enough attention or pay close enough attention to what it's communicating to us.
And I think there's also a point, and it depends on where you are in your walk, but like if you're feeling that nervousness, that anxiety, that maybe even panic attack or something like that in your body, like you don't have to engage with this person,
Right.
Like you can walk away.
Right. It's called fight or flight for a reason.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But also I think it's protecting, like we talk about, you can speak on behalf of yourself, obviously, speak your mind, or walking away also communicates that this is not, I don't want to engage with this person anymore. I don't want to be around this person anymore. That speaks volumes too. It depends on the situation, obviously. Trying to navigate that can be tricky, but you don't have to have a response either, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a valid response, a non-response, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have any other phrases?
I do, actually. I have two that specifically puts all of the onus on us, especially as women. So I'll share those. But then I want to share this one before I get to those. This is probably one of my favorite ones to hate. And I did not think of this one. I actually found... I didn't think of this. I found this online because after I made my list, I was like, okay, I want to see what other people are saying about this. Because, there's like blog posts and Substacks and whatever, all the crazy things you can find. And that's not biblical. That is extremely, not only thought terminating, but conversation terminating. Like, what are you supposed to say to that? Like, do you want me to pull out verses or show you the lack thereof of verses that defends my behavior, that this is biblical, or the Bible doesn't say anything about this? Like, it's just, my mentor would say that all the time. And it just drove me absolutely nuts, even when I was within the Christian community, because that is not helpful. Like, to use your phrase, that is not helpful. Like, if you're going to say that to me, then at least I would like you to have some like solid foundation of where that's coming from. Why are you saying that? Why do you get to determine that whatever this is not biblical? Either come up with the scriptures that you're going to proof text, that you're just going to pull out of your ass to make it work for you, or like something. Don't just shame me by saying that's not biblical.
So the real question is, well, what is biblical?
Yeah, exactly. Rape, slavery, and like dashing infants' heads against rocks is biblical. Do you really want to talk about that? So you really want to use that phrase?
Abortion is biblical.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So let's just go down the list.
Right. And then maybe that's one of the responses you can have to that. Like, well, if you're talking biblical, and then list some of those things, like these are all biblical. Multiple wives is biblical. Look at King David. He was a man after God's own heart. I mean, that's kind of a fool's errand, because then they're going to have, well, that was culturally blah, blah, blah. They're going to have excuses and gaslighting for all of that. I know, because I could play the game. But yeah, it's just, that one is...
What I hate that one. Biblical? Like, that's why we have 40, what is it? I don't know, tens of thousands of religions, right? And they all are biblical, right? All Christian-based, biblical-based religions.
Right.
So then what the fuck is biblical?
Right. Riddle me this.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's a great response. Well, what is biblical then? What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the last two, just kind of fast forward through it a little bit. Don't allow the devil a foothold. And I feel like this is
Well,
usually spoken to like a group, or the congregation, or in a women's Bible study or something. I wouldn't say this is necessarily a one-on-one exchange. I mean, it can be. It probably has been on my end. Actually, it has. When somebody asked me to get coffee after hearing about my journey, I think they said something like this. Um,
uh-huh.
but it's always spoken like in relation to any curiosity that one might have outside of what's considered acceptable within Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even when I was hardcore in the Christian trenches, I would tell myself that, like, well, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to allow Satan a foothold or whatever. So yeah,
So
that's
what would be a response to that? What would be a potential
yeah. I'm not really sure.
response?
Maybe well,
Mm-hmm.
okay. I like your design of asking a question in response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So don't allow the devil a foothold. What would you say to that? Can you tell me more about what that looks like, maybe?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Can you give me more detail about what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because then they could tell you specifically what it is that they see is the enemy in your situation. And then you can open up more about like maybe differing perspectives about that, you know?
Right.
That
Yeah.
might be a good way.
Yeah. That's good. And then
Keeping it simple is the best way to do this, you know? Because it's going to, like you said, test the waters.
and especially like you were mentioning earlier, like your heart starts pounding, and then all of the like energy and effort that would go into formulating complex phrases is gone
Mm-hmm.
because you're now in fight or
Mm-hmm.
flight. Not always, but
Right.
you know,
Right.
it's highly likely if you're outside of the church and you hear these things, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have some kind of visceral reaction. And so your brain is not going to be capable of coming up with some highly formulaic response. So it is really
Mm-hmm.
great to just put it into a very brief, pointed question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my last one was as this is specifically to women. We're called to submit to our husbands, just as your husband is called to submit to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I heard that so many times because I'm kind of rebellious. Like that's just the nature of me.
Yeah.
And, there would be things that I'd want to do or look into or something. And I don't know, like I would always ask my husband, kind of ask for permission in a way. And that is
Mm-hmm.
something that I've had to let go of in the last couple of years. And it's kind of weird. Honestly, it's very
Mm-hmm.
weird. Some of the things that I would ask him about, he'd be like, "Why are you asking?" Like he wouldn't like implement these things, but it was something that I was
Mm-hmm.
taught as a woman that I should be doing. So I would ask. And
Yeah.
thankfully, often he was like, I don't care. Like, it's fine.
Right.
These weren't like morally charged issues, that I was asking him about. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like that's something that I've had to slowly let go of. And it has been an interesting journey because it almost feels like betrayal in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kind of asking for quote unquote permission to do something or, to shift my schedule so that I can go to dive practice, things like that.
Yeah.
So it feels very foreign to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it still doesn't feel normal. I'm still working on kind of rerouting that neural pathway. Um, but yeah, like that phrase, like as women, we're called to submit.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that so many times, and
Yeah.
I don't know how I would respond to that. I mean, I don't know that I would ever hear that now because anybody I'm talking to
Right.
is not going to hold me to that standard.
Right.
That's more of like a kind of discipleship phrase, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that though? Have people said that to you or reminded you of that?
It's been a topic of discussion. What does it look like to submit?
Mm-hmm.
But I did not encounter that phrase blatantly in a thought terminating type of way.
Okay.
We definitely talked about what is submission,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, I think there was, like I've talked to you about before, a much more balanced perspective within the church setting that I was involved in most of the time.
Right.
Um, I can't relate to the feeling of being told you just need to submit, but I can relate to the feeling of like, what is it, questioning my motives and what does it look like for me to submit as a wife to my husband. Um, and just trying to navigate those waters that's a whole nother podcast,
Yeah.
right?
I was just thinking we need to talk about this topic at some point.
Sure. Yeah, but in a response to that, if I were to hear that, I think I would at this point genuinely just say that's not how it works in my marriage. You know,
Yeah.
I think that would be one of those things that I would probably, instead of giving a question, would just state, yeah, things don't work like that with us.
Yeah.
Now, the word submissive is one of those things, like we talked about, you know, I think that I do submit it sometimes, but I think it's more of like compromise, right? No, we figure out ways to compromise together, you know, he compromises, I compromise all the time, you know?
Yeah. That's what a great partnership looks like.
Right. And so, I think those two can easily be, linked, and in the way that I have approached submission, it looks more like a compromise in the areas that I'm willing to compromise, you know,
Right.
obviously. But I think that would be an easy one. Like, yeah, we don't do it that way anymore.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
said, I don't think I'm in danger of hearing this ever
Mhm,
because I'm
yeah,
no longer held to that standard. But it was
sure.
definitely something I experienced quite a bit. So anybody who finds themselves still in maybe a discipleship relationship with someone, or, you know, women's studies, I mean, this is mostly, I would say, going to be spoken to you by a woman, depending on the relationship you might have with a head pastor as a male. Like, I don't know, maybe a man would say that to you as a woman, but I would say most likely not. It's probably going to come from a woman. And yeah, you can just be very clear and loving and say, well, like what Anna said, that's not how it works in our marriage. Yeah. So that's
And
the
that
end
will
of my list.
probably, it might open up a conversation, you know. That's
Right.
the whole goal, right? Everything we're sharing is
That's
not
right.
just to highlight the thought terminating phrases or the faults within Christianity. It's partially that,
Right.
but it's mostly to give some ideas of how to handle situations like this, and to hopefully grow in your own ability to empathize even with people that still believe the way that you used to, you know?
Right.
Or if you're still in the church and you still believe some of these things, maybe give you options for better ways to handle how you engage with others.
Yes.
A little bit of both, a little bit of everything.
We're all about the resources.
Yeah. We're trying. We're trying
We
to
are
grow. We're trying
trying.
to create space for everybody.
Yes.
And hopefully you feel heard here today. And please, like Carrie Jo said, reach out to us anytime. We would absolutely love to engage with you where you're at and hear your story, and just also feel heard. We like to hear from the people that are listening to us. So if you
Yes.
are listening, please reach out. Let us know. We'd love to just know you're there.
Yes.
So other than seeing the listens on my Spotify for podcasters, I'd like to actually hear from some of you. So
yeah, it's so
that
much
would be great.
more warm and fuzzy. I mean, stats are good. It's good to know how many people are listening and how many, you know, clicks there were or whatever. But we love people. We love you, and we want to hear from you. It's like a shameless cry for interaction, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please
Speaking of,
let us know you're there.
I did get a text yesterday from a friend across the country.
You did? What did it
about the
say?
podcast. It said, "Hey, I just listened to your podcast episode with Keith Giles. It was so interesting to hear. I never knew most of the things he said. It's so cool that you were able to have him on your podcast."
Yay! That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, if you haven't
So if you
heard that
haven't
one, listen to it. It's very good.
Please.
I apologize for the abrupt ending. We have switched out. We've switched out our outro. It's much better now for interviews. But
if you decide to ever listen to all of our episodes, which kudos to you, if you're that person,
Gold star.
you must reach out to us. We
Yes.
actually probably want you on the podcast.
For real.
You know?
Like, you knew us from the beginning of the shit show, and we're just polishing the shit show up a little bit each time as we go.
Every episode is so different. Yeah. We're learning and growing all the time.
That's right.
But if you have listened to every episode, you must be on the podcast.
Yeah, for real.
You must.
And it doesn't even have to be like a serious thing. We can even just have you talk about your favorite parts of the podcast or something that made you laugh, or it doesn't even matter. You can be anonymous. We don't even care. We would just would love to highlight you for your dedication and support.
We just want to hear your voice is all.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. That wraps it up for today, I think. Huh,
yeah, it was awesome. It was much longer than I anticipated, but I know. But it was good. It was so good.
We have so much fun talking.
I know.
It's lots of great ideas come up too when we're in the midst of it. I really enjoy our process. So.
Same.
Thanks for joining us today, all you heretical hippies out there. You may not be a hippie, but if you're a heretic or a hippie or anything, thank you for joining.
Yeah, we love you.
Yeah, and that's it.
All right.
Peace out,
motherfuckers. Well, friends, that wraps up this heretical episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to rate and review our podcast and share with anyone who would be encouraged. See you next time.